I never imagined that my life would lead me here, sitting by the window of our cozy, time-worn house, watching the rain gently trace patterns on the glass. My name is Elena, and for the past 8 years, this place has been my sanctuary and my prison. Ever since Mark, my late husband, passed away, I had devoted myself fully to raising my stepson, Adrian. Adrian came into my life when he was just 12, a quiet boy with stormy blue eyes who hid behind oversized sweaters and sullen silences. He was Mark's son from a previous marriage, and though I had no children of my own, I embraced the role of a mother without hesitation. Those early years were delicate, filled with cautious conversations, long silences, and the slow weaving of trust between us. Now, at 19, Adrian is a young man, tall and composed, carrying the quiet intensity of someone who has seen too much too soon. His eyes no longer dart away when I speak. Instead, they hold mine a second longer than necessary, leaving me unsettled in ways I refuse to admit even to myself. This evening, as the storm whispered outside, I sat curled up with a cup of chamomile tea, listening to the soft creaks of the house settling. The quiet was familiar, almost comforting. That is, until I heard the distinct sound of Adrian's footsteps descending the stairs. His presence filled the room before he even spoke. "Couldn't sleep?" asked, trying to sound casual. He shook his head, running a hand through his dark, unruly hair. "Too quiet." I chuckled softly. Funny, I always thought quiet was supposed to be peaceful. He shrugged, settling onto the sofa across from me. The soft glow of the fireplace painted flickering shadows on his face, highlighting the sharp lines of his jaw and the depth in his eyes. We sat in silence, sipping our tea, pretending this was nothing more than an ordinary night. But it wasn't. For weeks now, there had been something unspoken hanging between us. Not quite words, not quite glances, but a heaviness I could feel in the way Adrian lingered in the kitchen after dinner, or how he seemed reluctant to leave a room when I entered. I had tried to rationalize it. Perhaps he was just missing his father, or perhaps it was the weight of approaching adulthood. But deep down I knew it wasn't just that. Tonight the silence felt different. He was watching me, not like the boy who used to seek approval for his school drawings, but like someone searching for something more. I shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to address it or to let it slip into the folds of the evening like so many other moments. "Mom!" His voice broke the quiet, hesitant yet firm. "Yes, sweetheart," I responded, keeping my tone gentle. He stopped, staring into the flames. "I've been thinking about us." The words hung there, bold and terrifying. My heart thudded painfully against my ribs. I wasn't sure what he meant, and I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "What about us?" I asked carefully, swallowing the sudden lump in my throat. He lifted his gaze to meet mine, his eyes searching, almost pleading. "It just feels like something's changed." Could barely breathe. The fire crackled, the storm hissed outside, and yet all I could hear was the rush of blood in my ears. Adrian's words were innocent on the surface, but the weight behind them was unmistakable. I forced a soft smile. "You're just growing up, darling. Change is part of it." He didn't look convinced. "It's more than that." For the first time I saw it clearly, the way his gaze softened when it met mine, the hesitation in his voice, the longing buried behind careful words. And as much as I wanted to dismiss it, to say it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, I knew it wasn't. I stood abruptly, setting my tea aside. "We should get some rest," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "It's late." He nodded slowly but didn't move. I turned away, retreating to the safety of my room, but even behind closed doors, I could still feel the weight of his stare, lingering like a secret neither of us could yet name. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I knew that this was only the beginning. The days after that stormy night unfolded in a quiet unease. I busied myself with small things, tidying up rooms that didn't need tidying, baking cakes I had no intention of eating, scrubbing the kitchen floor until it gleamed. I told myself I was just keeping the house in order, but deep down, I knew I was trying to silence the thoughts swirling inside me. Adrian, for his part, acted like nothing had changed. He went about his usual routines, late-night gaming sessions, helping with groceries, curling up with books on the worn armchair by the window. Yet there was something in the way he moved now. He seemed to hover more, linger near the kitchen door as I cooked, brush past me in narrow hallways with the slightest, almost imperceptible touches. One afternoon, as I was hanging laundry on the line in the backyard, I heard his voice behind me. "Need a hand?" he offered. I turned, startled, the sunlight catching his eyes and making them appear impossibly bright. "Oh, I'm fine," I replied, but he was already stepping forward, reaching for the basket. We worked in silence, the only sounds the chirping of birds and the gentle rustling of fabric. I tried to focus on the mundane task at hand, but every time our fingers brushed or our arms grazed, a flutter of nerves settled low in my stomach. I hated myself for noticing. "Mom," he said softly, breaking the quiet. I glanced at him, and the vulnerability in his expression made my breath catch. "I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable the other night," he said, staring at the ground. I didn't mean to." "Oh, Adrian." My voice cracked. "You didn't do anything wrong. I swallowed hard. I wasn't expecting it, that's all." He nodded slowly, still not meeting my eyes. There was so much more I wanted to say, but the words felt like they were caught in my throat. How could I explain the storm of emotions inside me? The part of me that felt protective, the part that clung to duty, and the quiet, shameful part that felt something else. Later that evening, we found ourselves in the living room watching an old movie, as we had countless times before. But this time it felt different. The space between us on the couch was narrower, the shared blanket somehow too intimate. I kept stealing glances at him, wondering if he noticed the shift too. At one point our hands met beneath the blanket. A simple, accidental touch. Neither of us pulled away. Instead, we both froze, breaths shallow, eyes locked on the screen as if pretending nothing had happened would make it so. But I felt it, the weight of that touch, the question it carried, the boundary it threatened to cross. I should have pulled away. I didn't. I sat there, paralyzed, confused, and most of all, terrified of the answer to a question I dared not even fully form. And when the movie ended and Adrian quietly whispered, "Good night," before retreating to his room, I found myself sitting there alone, staring at the darkened screen, realizing that nothing would ever be simple again. The next few days were a delicate dance, a constant push and pull between the familiar and the uncertain. I found myself scrutinizing every word, every glance, every seemingly innocent moment between us. Was I imagining it? Was Adrian feeling it too? Or worse, was it only me? I hated myself for even entertaining the thought, yet it clung to me like mist, subtle but ever-present. I tried to return to routine. The garden needed tending, the pantry needed restocking, and I convinced myself that if I could just stay busy, the quiet whispers inside me would fade away. But they didn't. One evening, as the golden glow of sunset bathed the living room in amber, Adrian sat sketching quietly by the window. He had always loved drawing. I used to tease him about how he could get lost for hours sketching trees, clouds, or stray cats lounging in the yard. "Is that the old oak tree?" I asked, peeking over his shoulder. He smiled, a soft, genuine smile. "Yeah. It's almost like you can hear it creak if you listen long enough." His words settled warmly between us. The way he spoke, the calmness, the weight behind it, was so unlike the Adrian I knew as a child. He wasn't a boy anymore. He was a young man with thoughts, feelings, and complexities I wasn't sure I was ready to confront. Our eyes met, and there it was again, that tension. Not awkward, not accidental, but charged. I stepped back, pretending to adjust the curtain, breaking the spell before it unraveled me. Later that night, I awoke from restless sleep and instinctively wandered to the kitchen for water. As I reached for a glass, I saw him standing there, lit only by the faint moonlight seeping through the window. He was staring out at the garden, the old oak swaying gently in the breeze. "Couldn't sleep either," I whispered. He turned, startled, then smiled faintly. No. I wanted to step back into the safety of my room, but instead I found myself walking closer to him. We stood side by side, staring out into the quiet night, saying nothing. And then softly he said it. I don't want things to go back to how they were before. My pulse quickened. What do you mean? He glanced at me, hesitant but earnest. I don't want you to keep avoiding me. I blinked, unsure of how to respond. Avoiding him? Was I? I'm not avoiding you, I lied, and we both knew it. He reached out, barely brushing his fingers against mine, a touch so light it could have been mistaken for nothing. But it wasn't nothing, not to me. My breath caught, and I stepped away instinctively, though every part of me wanted to stay. Good night, Adrian, I whispered, retreating to the hallway without another word. But long after I returned to bed, I lay awake, my mind replaying his words, his touch, and the terrible, wonderful truth I could no longer deny. Something between us had shifted, and there was no going back. The next weekend arrived draped in gray clouds, but the weather wasn't the only thing heavy in the air. Adrian and I carried with us the tension of nights past, neither of us brave enough to name it, but neither willing to pretend it wasn't there. Saturday morning was quiet. I baked his favorite, cinnamon rolls, as a peace offering or maybe as an attempt to keep things normal. He noticed, of course. Adrian always noticed. You haven't made these in a while, he said, smiling as he leaned against the doorway. I shrugged, hiding my trembling hands. I thought it'd be nice. He nodded, stepping into the kitchen without hesitation. His presence felt different, closer, softer, but without the nervous restraint of before. He stood beside me, helping with the icing like it was the most natural thing in the world. Yet, every accidental brush of his fingers against mine, every glance that lingered too long, sent flutters spiraling through me. I should have stopped it, I should have drawn the line, but all I did was breathe him in, unsure if I even wanted to stop. Later, after the rain began tapping against the windows and the storm thickened, the power flickered, then faded into silence. The house dimmed under the pale gray glow of the storm outside. Looks like it's just us and the storm, he said, half joking but with an undertone I couldn't ignore. We lit candles and sat in the living room, the flickering flames casting soft, golden shadows. I noticed how his eyes studied me, not in the awkward, uncertain way of a young man, but with quiet affection, admiration even. The lines I once relied on to keep my feelings in check were fading with every heartbeat. Without a word, Adrian draped a blanket over both of us. We sat close, closer than we ever had. The shared warmth beneath the fabric felt more intimate than any conversation we could have had. Do you remember when you used to read me bedtime stories? He asked, smiling faintly. I chuckled, my voice softer than I expected. Of course I do. You never let me stop reading until you fell asleep. He shifted, his shoulder pressing gently against mine. I think those were the only nights I ever felt truly safe after Dad passed. His confession hit me like a wave. I turned toward him, meeting his eyes, those deep, stormy eyes filled with vulnerability. I don't want you to feel unsafe now, I whispered. I don't, he replied without hesitation. Not when I'm with you. The air between us thickened. His hand found mine beneath the blanket, fingers intertwining, deliberate this time. I should have pulled away, but I didn't. Instead, I let myself lean into him, resting my head gently on his shoulder. He exhaled, slow and steady, like he'd been holding that breath for days. We stayed like that as the storm raged around us, two souls on the edge of something neither dared to fully name, yet neither ready to step back from. And in the quiet warmth of that candlelit room, I realized that whatever this was, neither of us wanted it to disappear. The storm didn't ease that night. If anything, it seemed like the universe itself was urging us to stay within the fragile world we had built under the blanket, beside the flickering candles. Neither of us moved. I don't know how long we sat there, pressed together, wrapped in that bittersweet silence. Adrian's thumb gently traced the back of my hand. It was such a small gesture, yet it sent a wave of emotion crashing over me. Every instinct told me to stand, to break the moment, to retreat to the familiar role of mother, caretaker, protector. But I stayed. I stayed because, for the first time in years, I wasn't just those things. In Adrian's eyes, I was Elena, simply Elena, and I realized how much I had missed feeling seen. "Can I tell you something?" he whispered, barely audible over the patter of rain. "Of course," I replied, my voice trembling. "I've always admired you," he confessed, turning slightly to face me. "Not just as the woman who raised me when you didn't have to, but as you. I've always seen you, Elena. Not just as mom. I don't even know when it started, but I can't pretend anymore." Tears welled in my eyes, both from fear and from the fragile beauty of hearing the words I had silently kept locked within myself. "I see you too," I whispered back. "I have for a while." His eyes searched mine, desperate for clarity, for permission perhaps. And for once, I didn't look away. The storm outside paled compared to the one inside me. But instead of chaos, it felt like surrender. Slowly, tenderly, Adrian leaned closer. His forehead rested gently against mine, both of us trembling, neither willing to break the fragile thread connecting us. When our lips finally met, it wasn't reckless or hurried. It was careful, reverent, and impossibly delicate. I felt the dam I had built inside me crack wide open. The years of loneliness, of hiding behind duty and fear, melted away beneath the weight of his quiet affection. When we pulled apart, neither of us spoke right away. There were no words big enough for the truth we now shared. "Is this wrong?" Adrian asked, his voice shaking. I didn't answer immediately. I simply took his hand and placed it over my heart. "Does it feel wrong?" I asked softly. He shook his head, eyes shining with tears. "No." And neither did I. That night, beneath the storm and the candlelight, we crossed a threshold that could never be uncrossed. Whatever came next, judgment, questions, or the inevitable tangled web of emotions, we would face it together. Because in that moment, all that existed was the simple truth that we saw each other, fully and deeply, as no one else ever had. And sometimes that's all it takes.